What's up, YouTube fans? Today we're going to do a comparison of the Star Toys tracker with the Takara Tomy Masterpiece tracks. So these are quite a few years apart. This just came out in October of 2025. This figure is from November of 2015. I can't believe how long ago. 10 years ago, which is crazy to me. So 10 years apart, a lot has changed since then. I was always surprised that Takara didn't do another version of this, but this is what we got. It's the only other Masterpiece tracks we have, really. So we're going to do a comparison. As I always mention with these comparisons, I try to be as objective as possible. Of course, there's subjectivity involved when you're comparing things like this. So if I pick one and you prefer the other, then you win. I try to do these comparisons to help people decide what direction they want to go with their collection, including keeping both of these, which is what I'm going to be doing. This guy, I typically keep the Takara for the alt modes and end up using the new ones if I like them for robot mode. So these will both be staying regardless. With that being said, let's get started in the review and we'll take a look at the accessories. All right, so here are the accessories they come with. Both come with a blaster done in silver and gray. The Takara one is painted. Both come with a little blaster for the front of tracks. For whatever reason, Takara put waffle on the bottom, but both have that. The Takara comes with a stand. It's actually quite a nice stand, but unfortunately the peg on mine broke. But I'll count the adapter for the Star Toys against the armature for the Takara. And then we're left with the faces, and I'll count maybe the base of this because it's the Star Toys didn't have a complete stand against the alien mask here. And we're left with two additional faces for Star Toys. So we're going to give accessories over to Star Toys. All right, next we'll talk about the gimmicks on these two. And they do both have the flight mode gimmick. They both have articulating guns up here in robot mode. Takara does have one additional gimmick, which is the opening hood, and it actually has engine detail under that hood. So just by a hair, I'm going to give the gimmicks over to Takara for that opening hood detail. Next, we'll talk about the cartoon accuracy and sculpt. In order to do that, we'll put the G1 image here so you can take a look for yourself. And for me personally, I think this is one instance where Takara definitely didn't get it right. The chest, first of all, sits a little high. It should have this shelf right here. That's obviously no Autobot logo because it's third party, but the shape of the chest is really close. Also the coloring. They did use the car canopy or the car's cockpit for the actual chest, whereas they went with a faux, which allowed them to change the shape of it. So that's how they got that. They also have slightly better legs. The Takara legs have always been really kind of awkward shaped. Thin thighs, the knees kind of stick out to the side. It never looked quite right, especially because they've got the curvature here of the front of the vehicle. So that also, and then the face sculpt, oddly enough, my personal opinion, the Star Toys did it better. I think their face sculpt not only looks better, but looks more like tracks. So I'm going to give cartoon accuracy over to over to Star Toys. When it comes to sculpt, I think I've got to give that over to Star Toys as well. The back especially is much cleaner, just because of the way they've designed it. From the side, they do have a little bit of see-through right here, but the Takara is really egregiously see-through. I mean, just the backpack is just very incomplete. And that's always been a complaint with this figure is, you can kind of see through it. There's just a lot of gap there in that backpack. So I'm going to give sculpt over to Star Toys as well. I think they did a better job overall on the look. Next, we'll talk about the paint on these two. And this one's surprising because Star Toys, at least the previous figure, didn't really have much paint at all. This one, it's got this metallic blue. It's got silver for the windows here. White, red, gray and red, yellow and red on the wings, yellow and red up here, white on the guns. The Takara, similar. It's got red and yellow here, red and yellow on the wings, red and blue for the face, same as this one. Red and yellow for here, white and red and blue for here. white and red here, and then gray and red for the feet, with a little bit of metallic silver paint for the body of the vehicle. So they're really, really close on the paint. So I'll give them a tie. All right, next we'll talk about the build quality in these two. And I do feel like this is a pretty light figure, but I don't have any problems with it breaking, at least so far. I have had issues with it being intuitive, especially the transformation to vehicle mode for all mode. But overall, the build quality is okay. I think I'd give maybe a slight edge to the transformation here. But then again, some of this feels kind of floppy and flimsy on the Takara. So I think I'll give them a tie on the build quality. There's a couple things I like about the Takara, but there's a couple things I think are better built on the Star Toys. All right, next we'll talk about the articulation on this two. In order to do that, we'll articulate each one individually so you can see how they work. For the Star Toys, the head has a ball joint, so it can lift up to there. It's also got a hinge. It's up to there, down to there. You get side to side and a rotation. So it's not only got the head joint, it's got the neck joint as well, which is a nice option. Arms can lift up to there. Also, shoulder joint can go up to there, so you can get totally up to there. Rotation at the lower bicep. You have a single jointed elbow gets you to there, but if you combine it with the upper arm joint, you can get a full bend out of the arm. We have a rotation here at the wrist, individually articulated fingers. Well, sorry, the bottom three are connected, and then the pointer finger is articulated, but it's curled, so you can't really do much with it. Thumb is on a hinge here. Coming down to the waist, you have a waist rotation. It gets a little held up, but if you bend the ab crunch, then you can get it rotated, basically anywhere you need it to. Ab crunch goes down to there. You can actually go one more click, but it risk scratching the paint here. So I would recommend not doing it, but you can go one more click down. For the legs, you can rotate the legs up to there. Actually gets pretty high. Only thing is the hip skirt kind of gets stuck because it rotates with the leg, but you can get it back to there and then hold here and it'll keep it from going back. Out to the side on friction. Tolerance, okay. Rotation of the thigh on a universal. Single jointed knee gets you a little past 90 or about 90 degrees. You have ankle tilts out to there. Forward and backward on this foot. And that's it for Star Toys. And I guess I should mention the wings can articulate in and out. You can also rotate it if you wanted to, although I wouldn't really have a need for that, but you can do that. And the guns up here can also rotate up and down. For the Takara version, we have the head on a ball joint, so it gets up to there, down to there. It does have a neck panel, so the neck panel does allow it to lift up, so it gets way down there. So they both have a neck panel. I'm going to give them a tie on that, side to side, and rotates around. So they did good articulation on that as well. The guns on this can also move in and out and up and down. Wings can go up and down, although this backpack's a little wonky, but can get in and out, forward and backward. Shoulders can rotate around, a little hindered by this backpack, which kind of gets in the way. The arms are supposed to peg in right here to the top of the chest. They often come undone. One of the irritations of this figure is this. They just don't stay in there. But arms do rotate, go to the side on this hinge, similar to that one, but it doesn't get that extra hinge that one gets. So single jointed movement here. Rotation at the lower bicep. Single jointed elbow. It does not have that extra joint there at the upper bicep, so you only get 90 degrees out of it. Rotation at the wrist. Fingers are all connected on a single pin. So neither of them really have fully articulated hands. So I'm not going to count that against Takara. They're about the same, but it doesn't have the double joint elbow, so I will count that against it. Coming down the waist, you have a waist rotation. You don't... Do you have an ab crunch? You don't have an ab crunch. So that's a little weird. I guess I don't remember that, but you don't really have an ab crunch on this thing. This is one of the irritations of this figure. This backpack comes loose, but yeah, there really isn't an ab crunch there. Legs, you can get a hip skirt out of the way. I hate that, how that works. Hip skirt's horrible, but leg kicks up to there, back to there, hindered back, out to the side on friction, rotation of the thigh and universal. Less than 90 for the knee. That's pretty poor for Takara. They are usually really good at articulation, but this is an older figure, by the way. Ankle tilts, the way they did it is very awkward. They've got it on the outside of the foot. It goes out to there, back to there, and forward and backward. So based on the double jointed elbows, as well as the ab crunch and the extra movement in the fingers, I'm going to give it over to Star Toys. They've got just a bit more articulation. It's also just more elegant in terms of the articulation. It does a better job. So we'll give it over to Star Toys. Next, we'll talk about the transformation and engineering on these two. And when it comes to transformation, this is kind of a no-brainer, at least for me anyway. The Takara is way more intuitive and fun to transform than the Star Toys. And it's really because some of the mechanisms they chose here in Star Toys, it can be frustrating. This one, it's basically, I don't even need instructions. It's just committed to memory and straightforward. Overall, it makes sense. When it comes to engineering, this one I debated a little bit. I do like some of the engineering on this. Specifically, I like that they did the faux chest to get the proportions correct. I also like some of the things they did down here on the legs. Cleanup on the backpack is pretty well done. I like the abs clean up here, although it's a pain to get it configured properly. It does look nice. But then there's other things that I think are really frustrating. These die-cast bars that fit into the top, frustrating experience. The side panels here that you have to fold out is also a frustrating experience. Getting things packed away in vehicle mode, especially the doors, frustrating. So I'm going to give engineering over to Takara, even though I think there are some cool things here. There is some innovative stuff. It overall becomes a frustrating experience getting it to alt mode. So I'm going to give engineering to Takara. All right, there they are in alt mode. And both pretty good looking vehicle modes. The Star Toys does have a lot more breakup. There's like this line across the front here. It goes right across the front headlights. You have a nice painted symbol there on the hood. The wheels are really close to the bottom of the ground, so sometimes, unless you have it perfect, sometimes it won't roll. I have it just right here, but good looking wheels. Intakes there. You have the painted tail lights. There's a lot of junk back here and a lot of breakup back here, especially in this section from the top of the roof back. This section here is pretty broken up. But overall, it's a pretty good looking Corvette. For the Takara, you got the Corvette symbols on the front and back, which adds to the detail. A little bit cleaner on the lines overall for the vehicle. There's less breakup parts, especially back here. That looks good. Silver wheels still. This one also rolls. This one rolls a little bit better, actually, than this one. You do have the head syndrome on both of them. So, I don't know. I think the Takara alt mode is a little bit closer to the actual Corvette and has a little bit less breakup. So, while they're really close, I think I'm going to give it to Takara. The other thing is the Takara, the transformation into the flight mode is much, much simpler. This one is pretty frustrating to get there just because you got to take apart a lot. So I'm going to give alt mode over to Takara. All right, next we'll talk about the cost on these two. And I actually had a hard time finding this guy in US retail stores. So unfortunately, I really can't find a comparable price. I like to use the prices from Ages 3 and up just because they don't monkey with the prices. But since they didn't have it, I did have to go to the Chinese stores. And this guy was a retail price of 90 US. This guy is a retail of 80 US. So Star Toys is going to win on price. Now, I don't factor in inflation in these prices. I know people have asked me to do that for a long time. I just don't want to bother with that because there's so much variables in there. But even without inflation, they're still going to win. With inflation, it would win even more. And the final factor in this comparison is the Members' Choice category, where I asked my members which one they prefer just based on their own personal preferences. and no other factors. And no surprise here, Star Toys dominated the members' choice, and they'll take the point for that. So final thoughts on the comparison. You can see the score, and Star Toys is going to take this one. And I am not surprised. This is a figure made 10 years after the Takara, so they've got some time to improve on it. And I am surprised, though, that Takara still took some points here. Especially, I do like the alt mode, as well as the transformation, and also the price point. It was pretty good. So, you know, it's a relatively decent figure if you could still find it. Now, at this point, very hard to find. I do notice, though, it is really awkward in robot mode, especially from the side. I think it's because the proportions, it has the chest kind of forward on the body. And so that looks a little odd. I think the proportions here are a little bit better. So that is one thing that stands out to me is over time, I think this has lost a little bit of its luster. But still, I'm going to be keeping it for alt mode. I think they still have some of the most beautiful alt modes in the Masterpiece game. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.